Thank you so much, Jordan. Thanks for having me, and thank you guys for joining today. So, like Jordan said, my name is Mallory Rubek. I'm the wellness manager at UF Health. So, I manage the employee wellness programs, and I've got a whole team. And, we do webinars like this, but we've also got a ton of other programs. So, I will say, while today's topic is on navigating social dining with ease, especially with the holidays coming up, if you do have questions or want more information about other wellness programs that we might offer or have available to you all, I'm happy to answer those at the end, or at least provide you websites and resources. So, with that, let's get started. So, navigating social dining with ease, it seems like, such a simple concept, but I do know that a lot of people struggle with eating out and eating socially. Again, especially with those holidays where there's lots of overconsumption of foods, maybe making you feel sick or overeating more than you normally would. So, just in general, today we're going to be addressing some barriers, some tips, and tools for navigating these holidays and other social dining events with ease. So, the objectives today are to understand the importance of having food at gatherings. We want to be able to list at least three barriers to eating healthier during social events, know how to implement mindful eating principles during social gatherings, which may not be a new concept to a lot of you, but maybe you've never actually tried practicing it before or actually tried out that concept. So hopefully this can serve as inspiration to put that into practice. And then to be able to come up with maybe a healthy dish to bring at a get together if you are interested in that. So we know that Veterans Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, other holidays are right around the corner, and food is such a huge part of any celebration, especially those holidays. So for fun in the chat, I want this to be, I don't want to say casual, but pretty interactive. So in the chat, you guys, if you have any go-to dishes or snacks that you usually bring to these events or you plan on bringing to events, go ahead and share that in the chat for fun. Maybe even a go-to dish that you bring to any potluck or tailgate or other social event. Um, I realize this presentation is at lunchtime and I'm eating my lunch after this, so you guys are already making me hungry. So of course this is for fun to get you guys to, interact and that sort of thing, but also get some ideas for what to bring to other events. I've already gotten some ideas, so I'm going to write these down personally. But yeah, I mean, as you guys can see, food is pretty much always going to be at these celebrations, which brings me to the importance of food at social events. Obviously, it's to feed people, but it can be a lot more than that. So, thinking about reasons like outside of like feeding your family and your friends, what are some other reasons that people, bring food to a family, a party, or a social gathering, or even a work event? I'll say in my office, we've done a few different times where we did like sort of like a cultural potluck. So bringing in something like a family dish or something like that. So I think, food is a center to a lot of social gatherings because it does have such a cultural and social aspect. People make memories with food, there's traditions with food. Um, Yeah, I like this. I like when people tell me that food is good. So it's part of like motivation. So people like sharing um, food with others, like the joy of giving back. That's a huge part of it too. So, yeah, I mentioned this earlier, and this is, pretty straightforward, but food is a basic necessity. So, of course, at events like these, we're going to usually have food. We all need to eat to survive at a basic level for our body to function, just like we need to drink water. So, if you think about your past experiences, you've probably been to a long event before where they didn't offer food, and think about how that made you feel. You probably felt hangry or just not so happy. So typically, people need to eat about every 2 to 5 hours for our bodies to function and for us to feel good and for us to have energy. So, first reason to have food at these events is just basic necessity. But like I mentioned before, beyond that, food is cultural, it's social, it helps us build connections. So, going out to eat is not only a great way to meet people, but also a reason to reconnect with friends and families. When I say going out to eat, like going to an event of some sort, we have conversations during meal sharing experiences. Even food itself can be an easy conversation starter. So that's a huge reason. And then finally, it's a way to show hospitality. I think someone mentioned this. You like that feeling of people saying that your food is good and you maybe like giving back to others. So again, serving is a great way to do something nice for others. It's a great way to impress others, maybe show how good of a cook you are. So food goes beyond those basic necessities. So now let's talk about barriers. So, what are some barriers to eating healthy at social gatherings? And I want you guys to think about your experiences and drop that in the chat as well. From personal experience, what you've maybe read online, what are some barriers to eating healthy and balanced when you're at a holiday event, a party, a gathering? Yeah, a lot of times there's no healthy options. Yeah, this is great. Holiday food tends to be very heavy. Family team seems to be against vegetables entirely. Yeah, it seems like a lot of holiday events, it's like we eat things that we typically wouldn't eat, or like heavier foods or more food than you normally would. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, rich food rather than fresh veggies. Mm-hmm. The downfall of wanting to taste everything. Oh my gosh, yes, that's so relatable. Yes, definitely. So lots of barriers. It can be really tough. You guys have covered a lot of these, but let's take a look at some of the more common ones. One, of course, lack of healthy options. A lot of times, healthy options are more expensive. It's harder to prepare. It's more time consuming to cook and maybe less filling. So, if you think about like buying a salad for 30 people with all the fresh vegetables and stuff, it might be more expensive and not fill people up as much compared to like just buying pizza and serving that to the group. And then, of course, when you go to parties and events, you don't have a choice of what is being served. Another barrier that it might be relatable to you guys is that there's too many options to choose from. So I'm sure that you've all been to a gathering with buffet style dining where all of the options look good and you just want to try everything, because there's so many foods maybe you typically wouldn't eat at home, and it just looks so appetizing, so visually appealing. You may think, well, I need to get the most out of this because might not be able to try a lot of these things for a while. So I'm just going to eat everything and stuff myself and maybe not feel so good after. Um, I don't know about you guys, but I'm getting flashbacks of me going to Golden Corral with my grandma when I was a kid, and I had that mindset. But there's like an excitement about it too. Um, yeah. Another barrier. So this one might be common. You may not have thought of this, but I'm sure we've all done this before, and that is restricting food prior to the event. So, what do we mean by that? There's often this temptation to restrict food before or after a social event, almost to make up for overeating or eating more than you normally would, or indulging in even higher calorie foods. And you might think, oh, I'm going to go all out at the event, so I should just not eat anything all day today so that I have leeway of my calories left. And we'll talk about, with all of these barriers, we'll talk about ways to overcome them. But this is definitely a common one. And the issue with this is that that mindset often leads to this cycling of dieting, where maybe it's restriction, there's cravings and hunger, there's then binge eating and overeating, and then guilt and shame and back around. So even if this was just during a one-time event rather than like a day-to-day situation, you can definitely see, and I'm sure many of you have experienced this before, where it's this restriction during those holidays, those cravings, the overeating, guilt and shame, and so on. And with that, even if this is tied to just an event or a holiday, if it's something that starts to happen as a pattern, you can accidentally create this cycle where you're experiencing this same cycle even outside of holidays and events, which is definitely something that you don't want and something that we want to avoid. The fourth common barrier, is that food can be a coping mechanism. So thinking about social events, it's all about social dining. With different environments and social interactions, it can cause stress and anxiety. And you may find yourself in engaging in emotional eating as a way to distract yourself or help cope with emotions, even social anxiety, like having a plate of food and eating and talking about the food is something to do. You could even compare this to like having a drink as a means to make yourself feel more at ease. With that, if you're using food as a coping mechanism, it can be hard to check in with your internal hunger and fullness cues when so much is happening around you. And we'll talk about what that looks like and how to address and recognize the hunger and fullness cues. And the final common barrier to social dining and sticking with your healthy eating goals while at a social event is accepting food when you are already full. And I think there's a cultural aspect to this, right? So that's because peer pressure is real. We don't want to seem rude or ungrateful to a host. So maybe we take more anyway and we overeat and feel sick. So again, food can be a sign of love and appreciation, especially accepting that food. So saying no can be difficult. So, these are all common, very valid barriers that I'm sure most of you related to, and things that we face when eating at holiday events or social events. So, with that, let's move on to our practical tips for overcoming these barriers and eating with balance and avoiding that cycle of dieting and restriction that we talked about a few slides ago. In general, this is really all about moderation. I like to say here too, a lot of times when it comes to any like wellness topic, whether I'm talking about stress management or talking about these like mindful eating techniques and that sort of thing, I like to recognize and share that I know a lot of these things are not revolutionary ideas that you've never heard of before. Like these are things that you have probably heard time and time again from wellness professionals. So I like to note here, like if you've heard of the concept of mindful eating or hunger fullness scale, like use this webinar today as a step to like actually take action. Maybe you've heard of these concepts, but this year, for the holidays this year, for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for anything coming up, you're going to actually put into practice some of these things that you've sort of heard about or know are effective, but maybe haven't actually tried before. So keep that in mind. Maybe use this as inspiration to actually create that action step this time. With that, I mean, I'll pause for a second. If anyone happens to have like comments or questions, you can put that in the chat now. Before we move on to our
the hard ones are
practical tools.
Look at the shipping address that's on the time.
All right. So we're going to have 8 practical tools. And the first one, or first step, is to set a clear intention. And, you may not have done this before, like actually think about an intention when it comes to your eating before you go to an event. But ask yourself before the event or the holiday, what do you hope to experience at the event? Like, what's your intention? What's your purpose? So sometimes enjoyment can be the priority, and you can focus on laughing, enjoying people at the party or event without feeling stuffed or so focused on the food. So, if it's Thanksgiving, maybe it's like catching up with friends or family that you haven't seen in a while. And you're like, I know there's going to be great food there, but what's my end goal? It's really going to be on like socializing and catching up with people. Maybe your intention is to celebrate the wedding of a family member. So you want to focus on fun activities like dancing and those sort of things rather than focusing so much on that delicious food. Or maybe it is the food, maybe you look forward to Thanksgiving or Christmas every year because you've got this delicious food that you don't get to eat that often. But this year, your intention is to focus on slowing down, savoring each bite, and maybe not over stuffing yourself because maybe you think of past experiences where you've just not felt so good after that event. So just kind of rethinking your intention at these events and taking the time to think about that intention before the event, knowing that physical nourishment might not be the primary priority, and that is okay. Sometimes just the experience and the enjoyment can be the priority as well. So that's the first step, is to set that intention. And, if you have something coming up, or if you already have your plans for Halloween or Veterans Day or Thanksgiving or Christmas, like go ahead and like write that down or brainstorm your intention for some of those events. So after setting the intention, kind of setting yourself up for that event, the next step is to nourish your body before and after the event. So it's important to have balanced meals with proteins, carbs, and fats to keep yourself satiated or full. And we'll talk about a little bit about what that looks like later on. But this includes avoiding guilt talk and restrictions, avoiding this all or nothing mentality, like I can't eat anything today, so I'm just going to overindulge at the event. Know that one high calorie meal is not going to change or ruin your goals or weight loss plan, for example. So, making sure that you're nourishing your body before and after, even if the event does have more unhealthy foods, you can eat before and after and at the event and still stick with your goals. So, this is all about just having like a more flexible mindset. Along these lines, this next step is to not come to an event starving. So, you know, have a nourishing snack before you go. and just so that you make rational and thoughtful food choices at the event. I would say, like, think about times where you've gone to like the grocery store hungry, and I'm saying this out of personal experience. I buy way more than I normally would. I buy things that I normally wouldn't buy because I am starving. So I'm not making as rational of choices if I'm going to a grocery store when I'm hungry. Same sort of thing with these events. If you're feeling hungry, eat, nourish your body. Don't have this mindset of like saving your calories for the actual event because that creates this cycle of like being starving and then eating too much. So it's okay to have a snack before, even if you are eating just like in an hour. I do this even with dinner. If I'm hungry, I'm listening to my body and I'm going to eat. And it is what it is, right? So some nourishing snacks could be yogurt with nuts and fruit, could be veggie sticks with hummus, avocado toast with an egg, something that has a nice mix of protein, fiber, and healthy fats to keep you hungry, but not too hungry. Step 4 is to practice mindful eating during the event. So, what does that mean? I mentioned that some of you guys have heard of this concept before. Maybe you do practice mindful eating, but maybe not as much, or maybe not at holiday events. But it's eating is all about being present with your body, remembering your intention behind the event. So, thinking back at that first step, what's your intention? And implementing some of these mindful eating principles. So I would say, just in general, like being mindful is all about slowing down. So finding ways to slow down during your meal. So maybe before you eat, expressing or thinking about gratitude for the meal rather than just diving in. Um, Sitting at a table with other people eating can help you slow down so you're all enjoying the food together rather than maybe multitasking and watching like a TV show or movie while you're eating. Um, we talk about mindful eating, it's a lot of it is like physically slowing down, which can be really good for your digestion as well. So, taking small bites and chewing slowly, really savoring the food, slowing down, enjoying the meal again, rather than maybe scarfing down those foods. This can help you avoid overeating as well. It takes a solid 20 to 30 minutes for our bodies to recognize when we're full. So if we eat a lot and we don't give that time to notice if we're full, that's where we can easily overeat. So yeah, slowing down, taking time to enjoy the meal, being present, using all your senses, smell the food, feel it, taste it, and really, really tune in to your hunger and fullness cues. Again, especially during these holiday times where there's this overabundance of foods and delicious foods that we don't always eat. So, what is the hunger fullness scale? I think this is such a great concept, and I would encourage you guys to use this outside of social events or holidays and that sort of thing. But it's basically a slide. It depicts the hunger fullness scale, which is a widely practiced mindful eating technique. So it's basically just a scale from 0 to 10 that shows where you may be on your hunger and fullness feelings. So your goal as a human is to try to remain at all times between a 3 and a 7 on this scale. So that means really just paying close attention or being mindful of your own body and how hungry or full you may be, usually every 3 to 4 hours. So you're trying to avoid ever getting to a point where you are ravenously hungry, right? So that would be at a 0 or a 1 or a 2, or ever getting to a point where you are so stuffed that you feel sick or there's pain. And, I did mention this, but a lot of times fullness comes with time. So that's why it's important to eat slowly, chew thoroughly, and wait 15 minutes so you can really process how full you actually are. Um, with this, I like to think about, I feel like American culture, it's this like quick bites. Like I've noticed, when we go to a restaurant, like a lot of times you'll be in and out, eat by the time you order, eat your full meal, pay, and then leave. Usually it's only like an hour. And you think about like European culture, let's just say like in Italy or something, they'll spend 5 hours at a lunch. And I think this, like, there's a cultural difference in like the practice of eating and sharing food, but even just physically eating slower and savoring your food, allowing that time for digestion and that sort of thing. So, maybe you can be inspired this year for your holidays to um, have more of let's just say like European cultural eating experience where it's slower and there's more time. And you just really take your time with that like eating experience. So I will say with this, oh, I like that you mentioned that. So Sherry said they just left Italy and we noticed this very thing. Yeah, I studied abroad in college. I went to Ireland and I noticed one of the first things I noticed when we would go to a restaurant is like we would be done with our food and the servers would be like, you guys are already done. Like we would get these looks like we thought that you would be here for another few hours. So there's not this culture of like in and out and getting as many people as possible to like buy from this restaurant. It's just it's a lot slower. So yeah. I will say with this hunger fullness scale, it takes practice, being able to recognize how hungry you are, being able to like put a number to it, whether you write it down or just think about it. It definitely takes practice and intention. So maybe one of your goals after this is okay to set a goal to just notice and practice this recognizing your own hunger and fullness next time you have an event. Yeah, and you do make a good point too, Deborah. A lot of restaurants in the US do kick you out as soon as you're done eating. Yeah, I think because it's, you're trying to get to the next person. Maybe there's a lot of people waiting. So sometimes you can't necessarily avoid that, but yeah. hmm And that may not be the case if you are having an event for like a holiday at like a family member's house and that sort of thing. I think there's more potential to slowing down and changing the culture if you are at a family's member's house. Mhm. I did want to share a few resources, a few more resources of mindful eating. So we have an interactive course on our website. Um, Actually, after this, I can send a link in the chat. Um, it's under wellness topics, nutrition, and then it's this mindful eating presentation. It's just a little more in-depth information and tools about mindful eating and building a healthy relationship with food. So if you want to learn more about that, that is there. I will say too, when it comes to mindful eating, we have another program coming up. Some of you, if you've participated in our programs before, we do this one. I think this is the second or third year in a row we've done it. We do always change up the tips and the content, but it's called Choose Wisely, and it's an 8-week program, text-based program where you'll receive a daily tip to help you make healthier choices and develop a more mindful relationship with food. So that is from November 3rd through December 26th, and you can actually register for that now. I'll wait a moment here. There's a QR code if you're interested in signing up for that. I'll give you a moment to do so. And that one, of course, happens during the holiday season. So, really relevant and practical tools like in the moment when you might be experiencing some of these barriers that we talked about in this presentation. Looks like Jordan put that in the chat. So, thank you for all of that.
PO stuff. Um, so
So, step 5 is to have balance at your social events. So, we talked about how you might be indulging in some foods that you normally don't eat, and that is totally okay. We want you to enjoy these foods and to enjoy yourself. But just remembering what a healthy plate looks like can help you pick healthier and better balanced options or foods at the event. So, a healthy plate, if you guys are familiar with my plate, would look something like this. So, usually a healthy oil, um, about half your plate, it should be fruits and vegetables, usually mostly vegetables. And the more variety and more colors, the better. So maybe some green vegetables and orange and yellow vegetables. And then a quarter of your plate, whole grains, like whole grain pasta, brown rice, quinoa, things like that. And then a healthier protein or leaner protein like fish, beans, poultry, and so on. In general, this is what a healthy plate looks like. So keep this in mind. You may choose to keep this visual of this plate in mind when you are filling your plate up, even like at a buffet style plate. So it doesn't have to be perfect, of course, but being more mindful about your choices and the quantity can certainly help. So, for example, maybe you start to fill your plate up with some delicious chips, dip, and a cupcake. You notice your plate is getting quite full and you don't even have any vegetables yet. So maybe instead you start with your vegetables and fill up like about half your plate with those vegetables, maybe a fruit kebab or something. And then in the smaller sections of your plate, if you're literally filling up your plate, you may add like a dessert or other things, or maybe some mac and cheese, but maybe a smaller portion, and so on. So just visualizing this my plate can help you make better choices in the moment, even when there's a buffet style event. Step 6 would be this one's pretty simple, but again, we don't always think about it when we're like overloaded with these delicious choices. But assess all the options before you load your plate. Again, especially with a buffet style event. So there may be lots of delicious and tempting options to choose from. And you may want to just start loading before you look at all the options. But take a moment, slow down. I'll say like keywords and themes here is really just intention and slowing down. Walk around, see what you really want, and maybe start with 3 to 4 options instead of all of them. You can always go back for seconds, but you may find yourself overeating or overindulging if you fill up your entire plate first. Step 7 is setting boundaries and being okay with setting boundaries. It's okay to say no to food if you are full or don't want it. Think about this, like, is feeling sick or stuffed worth feeling like you were rude for declining? Usually not. The reality is setting a boundary most likely won't offend the other person. Just be clear that the food is delicious, but you are full at the moment. So be honest with yourself, notice your hunger, fullness scale, and cues, and set that boundary and say no if you want to. Or take it to go. Like I would love to eat this now, but I'm so stuffed. But please let me take it to go so I can try your delicious food. And step 8 is to watch out for liquid calories. Most liquid options at parties or events are very high in sugar and calories. And this is not me saying like don't drink these fun drinks at all, but just be really mindful if this is part of your health goals. Be mindful that liquids are a way to really amp up the calories. So just being mindful of that. Um, Choose water over other beverages to stay hydrated. Maybe have water in between every other drink, things like that. Just to give you guys a visual um, of these liquid calories. They can just add up really easily and quickly. So 8 ounces of orange juice is about 110 calories. Mocha latte is about 400 calories. Soda or sweet tea can be about 280 calories. 2 beers is about 300 calories. So if you had all of these at an event, that's almost 1,000 calories just in liquids, which is half or more of your daily energy needs. Now, I will say, if you're not worried about this, I do want to go back to the point that like one day of overindulgence, or maybe eating more calories than you normally would, is not going to ruin like a more steady or sustainable goals that you have. Like if you don't eat like this every single day, but you want to drink or eat like this on Thanksgiving or that sort of thing, it's not going to mess up your goals. So just know your own goals, know yourself, and be mindful where you can. So, finally, onto the topic of just bringing healthy options to share. This is something that you can control. You can't always control what others bring, but you can control what you bring. So, if you choose to bring something at an event, it will help you have some more control over what the food is available. So just a few ideas. Again, some of these are pretty straightforward, but it might be something that you wouldn't think of bringing to like Thanksgiving or Christmas. So a typical like veggie tray with hummus, or maybe a homemade hummus or bean dip, or even tzatziki dip, or even vegetable skewers for like a barbecue. Be really light and healthy, that you may not typically have at Thanksgiving. Really, another easy one, of course, is a fruit tray, fruit skewers, anything like that. It's just making sure there's some fruit and veggie options at the event. Other ideas that are pretty easy. So you could do whole wheat crackers or chips with a chunky homemade salsa. Another idea could be roasted chickpeas. You could do a lot of different flavors with this. Could be really good as like a little appetizer or side, or popcorn by adding some spices or herbs to that. If you don't mind a bit more prep, some mini sandwiches on whole wheat bread with protein and veggies, maybe fish or chicken tacos or skewers. Could be some other ideas. Shrimp kebabs. Um, I'll say these are all pretty inclusive, just like any event, not necessarily like typical Thanksgiving or Christmas foods, but just some ideas to keep things lighter and maybe a little more healthier. And then some other Thanksgiving side dish ideas. I know a lot of people mentioned at the beginning, like Thanksgiving, for whatever reason, and Christmas, it tends to be like heavier, richer foods than we normally would eat. So maybe consider bringing something a little lighter, like a shaved Brussels sprout salad or some stuffed acorn squash, things that would be in season around that time. Garlic green beans, maybe a butternut squash soup, maybe a pumpkin hummus with like some whole wheat tortillas, or even a kale citrus salad. Lighter and healthier to help you stick with your goals. So, just as a summary, I did a lot of talking and that sort of thing, but we talked about like common barriers to social dining with the holidays and that sort of thing, and then went through each of those barriers to come up with some solutions and practical tips. Really leaning in on just intention, mindful eating, thinking about your goals, slowing down, adopting that maybe European culture and slower eating, and then sort of simple tricks to building your plate and that sort of thing during social events. With that, I want to invite you guys, if you have any questions or comments or like other barriers that we didn't talk about, feel free to share that in the chat. If you have other questions about programs or resources, I can share about that. And if you guys don't end up having anything, hopefully you gain some nuggets and some ideas and just new intentions to bring to your holiday gatherings this year.